all. So I hit the OK button. Okay, so it is 1 minute after. And thanks everybody for coming to the security working group meeting. And so today we've got 3 topics. The first topic is the CIS Community Consensus Security Benchmark for ROS Melodic on 1804 being open for public comment. That was Sid's topic. But real quick, does everybody know what the CIS benchmark is? It's the Center for Internet Security's public. There is a not-for-profit. Their benchmarks are public, so after this happens, it'll be made public for everybody. People tend to make tooling around it, but what's kind of neat about it is it's very popular in the cloud, very popular in the edge and the enterprise. So your robot could have a standard security benchmark that doesn't need us to go in, as roboticists to tell the enterprise why it's secure. It's understood. The security department should like that. The IT department should like that, et cetera. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sid.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Hopefully y'all can hear me. So just a little bit of background on what we've got going on here. So this is a CIS ROS Melodic benchmark. We selected Melodic because it's the one that's most widely adopted. I think it's probably the most used version in the field. And the benchmark should have gone public this morning. I have a hard time seeing it because I have a private account, but you should be able to access it. And what I mean by public is, it's open for comment. It's not actually published. It won't be until we agree to publish it. A little bit of background, just to add to what Joe said on the CIS benchmarks. I know I can say, from my experience as a CISO, it's like you have to have a benchmark. Well, don't have to, but it makes it so much easier to deploy tech onto the network. So the huge thing that this does is it answers the question of, is this robot secure? Is this ROS build secure? Can I put it on my network? So that's why we're pushing for that. I get you the link. I get you the link to the. It's actually the same link that's in the agenda. This is the link.
Yeah, it's in the agenda, Doc Ruffin. Sid, I don't actually see. Well, I guess it's not actually public, right? Or it's not released, so it's not going to be in the list of benchmarks that you gave in the agenda.
Right.
How to other folks on the call, how would they actually see this so that they can make comments?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is to register for the workbench. So the workbench is a place where the community gets together to haggle over the actual settings. And the workbench is you self-register for an account, and then you get access to comment actually on all the benchmarks, and you have to find the ROS benchmarks. I think I'll probably walk through that myself with another account just to see what it looks like, or if Kyle or if anybody doesn't have an account, if you can just walk through it. But it's all through the workbench, the CIS workbench.
I have an account, but all I have access to right now is the Ubuntu one. So maybe that would be a good example walkthrough.
Yeah. So we probably need to take that offline. I don't think we want to solve that now. But before, I was just getting the template set up with CIS. It was only for it wasn't available on the general workbench tool, so it should be available as of this morning. And then, so within the workbench, you set up all the settings, all the things that you want to lock down for, that you agree is standard best practice for a ROS system. We chose to start with ROS Melodic running on Ubuntu 1804, and essentially what we did was copy over mainly the Ubuntu 1804 hardening guides with the hope that the community would come in with some more things to lock down specific for ROS. I think some of the things we'd like to do is, maybe put some tighter permissions on some of the install directories or the config directories, maybe give some guidance on auditing, logging, and things like that. In general, the CIS benchmarks follow a tiered structure. So a benchmark is slave to a parent, is slave to a parent, is slave to a root. So the Ubuntu benchmark is actually slave to Debian. Well, I should say its parent is Debian, and then Debian's parent is Linux in general. So what that means is that as the Ubuntu or the Debian or the Linux benchmarks change, those settings can be rolled down to the ROS benchmark. It's up to ROS to choose whether or not they want to accept any of those changes, but we'll be aware of those if any of the parents change. The other interesting thing is that benchmarks have different profiles. The Ubuntu benchmark in particular has 2 different levels. It has a level 1, which is a standard security profile, and then a level 2, which is a hardened profile that might go in special, high-risk environments. There's also a profile for a workstation and a profile for a server, so that you can see how your settings will be very different for an Ubuntu workstation versus something running in a data center. So,
if I can interrupt just really quickly. Once you create an account, if you go up to communities and search for ROS, you'll find it. But so it does look like it's there. It wasn't like that before. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. So
where's the community link?
Once you log into your account, it's a tab up at the top.
So I've made an account. I've logged in, and I'm on the home page. Do I have to go to my profile? I see cybersecurity, best practices, tools, and threats. Those are the tabs in the top. I'm not seeing a community.
Are you in your dashboard or?
I'm on the main page, cybersecurity.org. I don't know what a dashboard is.
Oh, did you go to that workbench link that I gave you?
I got this. All right, I got to the CIS-benchmarks. The word community is not on the page, except for global community. I got join the community. I'm already logged in.
Maybe the fact that I was a member of the Ubuntu community meant that I went. So I end up here once I log in. Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. Ruffin, how about we chat about that in Matrix?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. And the other thing is I want to get, CIS will help us work through getting kickstarted as well. So, and I know, there's lots that we can do with this, but I just want to kind of get it started, get a community to start talking about what the security settings should be. And I'll just end it by saying this is really targeting operational robots in the field so that they can be dropped on an enterprise network, and you don't get your standard security team is able to assess and tell whether or not they're configured in what the community says is a secure way. So is there any other comments on that? I think we got to kind of get this. I'll see what I can do to ease the kind of onboarding. And I was going to announce this on Discourse as well. When we have
that post, it would probably be good to use Ruffin to use his experience to actually document how you create an account, how you join the community, and participate, so that not everyone has this question. Does that make sense?
I think I'm in limbo. I applied, I verified my email, but then I have to wait for a manual approval or something.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
If it makes you feel any better, Ruffin, I've been approved, but it won't take my password that I use to create my account. So who knows how this works? maybe we just DDoS them with all of our signups. But Sid, I think we're. Are you done on that topic? Or
Wait, if I may make one last comment.
no?
Um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Once we do all get access, we'll notice that the benchmark, like Sid mentioned, is primarily made up of different components of the Ubuntu benchmark from which it inherits. There isn't a lot of ROS specific stuff there, even though I think there will be some. We wanted to make sure we had more people than just us to review those before we start adding them. So just a heads up. Things like maybe listening to local hosts, like that type of, as opposed to just all interfaces by default, like ROS1 master does. So things there is definitely still work to be done here.
Yeah, and in the end, we should have a more secure robot with and the benchmarks are interesting if you're not familiar. It's not like most where it's it's not a 0 or a 1. It's not binary. It's a score. So you get a score. How close are you to meeting this benchmark? So it'll help us make a robot that's less hackable. Changing from that time that if we think about robots of yore, where they were on dedicated networks, they're isolated from everything else, but now they're on the same Wi-Fi as the person who brings in their own phone and gets on the corporate network, right? So we want to do things to make our robots less likely to damage things, and also further enterprise adoption of ROS, because corporations are really into benchmarks. So next topic, the vulnerability reports doc version 0.2. That's you again, Sid.
Yeah, sorry. I just added a link to it. Just want to remind everybody that that's out there. I haven't received any comments on it. This is the internal version of the external vulnerability disclosure process that we went through. This defines the roles of reporter, owner, somebody who owns a vol that's reported, and then the maintainer, and what they're supposed to do, what an owner's supposed to do when they receive a vol and take it to a maintainer to fix. And I know how to do some CVEs, report the CVEs in or propose. There's some questions out there. There's also, I know Victor was concerned about how to gain access to the security at Open Robotics alias, which is where the reports are in. All that's intended to be covered in this document, and then it's got to go somewhere. But just still looking for feedback on that. That's it for that, Joe.
Sid, you might want to update that date, otherwise people may not make any comments.
Yeah, let me give it. What should I give it? Another 2 weeks? Do you think?
It's your call. Yeah.
Let's shoot for another 2 weeks. We'll see if we get some feedback by that'll be July 28th for our next meeting, and go from there.
For what it's worth, that is the direct link to the ROS community, I believe. So I don't know if you can try that, Ruffin.
I think I'm in the same boat as you were, that my password that I applied to, then Chrome remembered, is not the one that.
Yeah, I just had to reset it.
Actually, I did too. I tried to log in and it told me, hey, you're using a password for an old Workbench. What? And then I had to reset it.
It doesn't accept a password.
So I'll take that, the link. There you go. But I think that's the shareable link, community/108. After you reset your password. But none of us have ever made a mistake with our with our coding, right? I'm sure they implemented something new. Ted, tell us about the no-DL design.
Yeah, so a couple of changes had to be made to the no-DL specification. First off, we had to add a executable attribute at the node level. So this creates a bit of a problem in the future when we start thinking about the component system that dynamically loads nodes, but we needed the executable in place in order for the launch file to actually, or the launch integration to actually be able to look up what node is being launched from a given executable. On top of that, the export method was documented. Originally, it had mentioned something about using the export field in package.xml, but turns out that the appropriate way to handle exporting plugin related things is to use the ament index. So I documented how you use the ament NodeL package to get the CMake macro that does it for you, or otherwise where to put files with setup.py. Hopefully that can be automated at some point in the future. And we gutted the QoS attribute. It's something we definitely want as a feature at some point in the future, but there's no real need for it at the moment. And it was just causing headaches worrying about uniqueness and compatibility.
On the fact that actions and services do weird things with QoS.
Yeah, actions have like 5 different QoS profiles, and on top of that, some of them are named like the server version of the QoS profile, the client version of the QoS profile, the weirdness. So we'll worry about that when we actually have a use case that consumes NodeL and cares about QoS. Also added mention that the NodeL package contains these XSD schemas, and formally changed all the references from Node IDL to NodeL. So that's been what we did do. We have an ongoing proposal, which is for action, service, and topic. There's 2 booleans that state what the interface does. For action and service, they specify whether it's a server or client, and for topic, whether it's a publisher or a subscription. We currently have to do a little bit of external error handling in the parser, just because XSD does not specify a way to implement the or that's logically assumed between those 2 booleans. Like any interface has to talk in some way, so either it talks or it listens. So what we proposed was change that from 2 booleans in each field to 1 enum typed attribute called role. And the role would either be for the ones that are named server, client, or both, and for topics, publisher, subscription, or both. That way, all the valid cases are enumerated, and it shortens the declaration of interfaces very slightly.
Ruffin, given you're one of the only ones who's actually defined a similar schema in the past, it would be useful to get your thoughts on that latest comment on the design doc if you have some time.
Yeah, the enumeration of roles, that wasn't too big a concern. I think another bigger one was the like one thing I did early in ROS policy profiles was the inversion of clustering or grouping. So like whether I grouped permissions by nodes and then the topics that each node does, or by topics and which node. So I think by node and then topic, makes more inherent sense because of the sort of the relationship model. But it's good that that the XSD is versioned, because we'll probably want to ratchet when we find maybe more elegant means of in specifying or coding or being future proofing. Or like you said, the QoS seems to be a non-trivial permutation, because services need reliable transport, but the feedback for actions can be best effort, and all those.
Yeah, and then we'll need to be able to compare them as well, and the whole that whole like house of cards started crumbling.
Have you seen some of the latest QoS discussions that have been preceding, I think, the middleware working group?
The non-DDS RMW one, is that?
I think it was on the thread on ROS on 5G and supporting those QoS avenues.
Oh man, no, I haven't been following that too closely. What's going on? Is it just going to get more complex?
Like people have they want to push more exposure to the various QoS options that are needed for industry, and there's people like, what about the RMW implementations that aren't DDS? How are they going to implement? Are they going to have to implement these QoS? And I'd really like to see that kind of resolved, because someone did have a point in pointing out every time we have to add a new QoS option, the RMW kind of explodes in a refactor.
Yeah, there's a lot of churn there.
Like one thing personally for me is like I wanted to have a switch between reliable or best effort QoS for image transport, but image transport relies on message filters, and message filters was not using any of the API to expose the additional QoS options, and so I had to do it. It's not even done yet, but
interesting. And then once it is done, if another one is added, does that require more work on message filters?
I think at least the latest iteration, they're a little bit smarter about it, and then you pass this abstract structure rather than a specific field on QoS or another. So that's better. Yeah, but I read through the IDL. It looks really nice. But like I said, it's maybe once we start using it, we'll get a better feel for what changes may need to be made.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, another point I guess maybe I'm just sort of repeating everything that Ted said, but it was really interesting when some of these changes are as a result of the demo that Ted gave. I guess it was about a month ago now, doing the secure launch, where it was really like the executable thing. We realized that we had this whole IDL and they were mapped to nodes, but there was no actual way to pull out what node was being run at all. And I'm really, it just reminds me that ROS is trying to move to these composable nodes and the plugin system, and I am very concerned about how that is going to end up working. Just something to keep in the back of everyone's heads.
Yeah.
So
as of now, we can't add NodeL coverage to demo nodes CPP because all of those are using the composable node system.
Right now you're operating on the premise that you can narrow down a node to a binary on disk.
Exactly.
What's the limitation of having it abstract to whatever ROS launch is using to interpret how to grab the component to put in the larger
That
node.
happens outside of the actual launch invocation. Like launch is completely handed off at that point to something else in RCL that handles loading and preparing the node. Like launch invokes some arbitrary program that dynamically loads in the data.
Oh,
So we'd have to move all the logic down to a lower level where we no longer have access to what the user passed in as command line arguments unless we handle injecting those and carrying them all the way down from launch into the RCL library itself.
what specific binary is ROS launch invoking when it wants to launch a compose node?
That's a good question that I haven't thought about in about a month. So I will get
So
to
I
that.
didn't really think this was going to become relevant, but there's actually a issue I've been trying to work on. I'm going to go ahead and pop a link over here right now. This is actually trying to come up with a way of redesigning some of the stuff that's actually happening within ROS launch to do a better job of splitting out the concepts of nodes and executables and things like that. And if we can actually get that thing pushed through, I don't know how much overlap there is with what you guys are trying to do here, but there might be, a case for some synergy to show up, and maybe a, new way of looking at the launch file might give you better access to the kind of things that we were talking about.
So I'm already seeing some of the most recent comments talking about mapping nodes to node executables. So that's exactly what we want. That's entirely like what.
That's why we added the executable tag. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
if
well,
there's feedback you guys have on this, I would love to get more feedback on that. So maybe we can, get some buy-in and get this moved to the point of saying, hey, let's go actually implement it.
I'll read through that. Thanks, Roger.
Yeah. Likewise.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left. I don't think there's time to start a new topic. Any announcements before we call it a meeting?
Has anyone heard about the middleware working group on whether they got a set? Does William have a date for that yet?
I haven't heard.
Okay.
Okay, then let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
See you.
Thanks, everyone. Good chatting with y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, thanks.